Alright, hello again everyone, it's Ilak and it's August 2nd, 2016, and today I want to just give some more information on the sacrifice of the so-called Messiah, Son of God, Jesus, or as some call him, Yeshua, or Yahweh, right, from the Hebrew. And I've been teaching that there's a serious problem with this sacrifice of Jesus and with this Jesus character in the first place. Anyway, one of my recent videos called Calvary Was Not Kosher looked a little more in depth at the sacrifice, right? And showing how it just didn't add up with the precepts of how the sacrifice was carried out in the Old Testament. And I just want to point out a few extra things about this sacrifice again in this lesson. It's going to be interesting again what I'm pointing out here. We have to see that, there's a trick in saying that Christ was our Passover lamb or Passover sacrifice. But playing it off as if he died for the Day of Atonement sacrifice in place of the Day of Atonement sacrifice. So if you're going to get technical, I guess some people would say that he was actually the Passover lamb and not the Day of Atonement sacrifice. But again, like I'm saying, it's a trick. The way they big up this Jesus so much and the way they've presented him in the text, in the New Testament, by linking and stealing things from the Old Testament, verses from the Old Testament, prophecies from the Old Testament, is to make it seem like he's both Passover sacrifice and Day of Atonement sacrifice. You see, things don't need to actually be very clear in the New Testament. If you can just put up a big charade or some fancy lights and fancy fireworks to go off with some miracles, or by hyping him up with how he's a great high priest and lamb of this and whatever, and that he's the son of the creator and all that. If you can hype him up like that, then he can fill all those roles, right? And so here is some information from a website I want to talk about. Although my main thing here is to show just a little bit of information that you can go and look up yourself about the Shekita or the Shochet, right? And we're going to talk about that some more. That's the ritual dealing with the sacrifices of the animals. To show how Christ really doesn't fit into all of that, right? Which presents a problem for Gentiles who say they're Christians in the Christian religion, but also for the Hebrews who say that Christ died for them, right? Now, first I want to read from John chapter 19, verse 34. This is after he had already been put upon the cross, so he's already crucified. But one of the soldiers with a spear pierced his side, and forthwith came there out blood and water. Alright, now I'm going to touch on that with the Shochet, right? But just to point out, normally the priest would just be carefully slitting the throat of the lamb, of the animal, right? But apparently this doesn't happen with Jesus. So again, you see, my problem here is that usually when you're dealing with the same kinds of sacrifice in the Old Testament, it just usually goes in the same kind of way, right? I mean, sometimes someone would substitute a different kind of offering, because they couldn't afford another kind until they got all the way down from, down to like pigeons, right? Because it's what they could afford if they couldn't bring an actual lamb and so on, right? So they would substitute, but then that's kind of different from saying that now the sacrifice is actually underway, and you're not going to like slit the throat in that same manner with the same kind of knife and so on, right? Carefulness with the knife and so on. Now they're just going to drive nails into him, and don't sprinkle his blood around in the temple and so on, but just let him be dripping right there on the ground. And apparently don't sprinkle it on anyone and all, but he's just dripping, right? And then to go take a spear, which is a new kind of action, and jab him in his side. And like it says here, there came out blood and water. And we don't see anywhere where an animal has already been offered on the altar. Like for Jesus, I guess his altar of sacrifice is the cross, which is kind of odd and strange, because I never heard them stringing up in a pigeon dove to a cross. But anyway, that's his altar, it's the cross. But I don't read of any place where after some lamb or so has been already offered up, that somebody comes along, whether the high priest or some other younger, newer priest in training, probably, come and jab the sacrifice in his side, right? So it's like too many elements about this New Testament story, not just with the sacrifice of Calvary, but the whole overall day of Pentecost and outpouring of Holy Spirit speaking tongues. Too many things in the New Testament are just found to be so different from what's in the Old Testament, right? So I mean, it's just my problem. It just seems to break from the traditions and the normal way of doing things from the Old Testament, which in the Old Testament what you can see is that the normal way that they're supposed to do things, which Moses said time and time again, just do it the way I said, but these are my instructions, so on and so forth, right? So it's like you can read in the Old Testament and people are usually doing the same things, right? Except for when they're clearly going off and then some punishment is going to come, judgment is going to come, a prophet's going to prophesy to try to bring them back, and sometimes they would return to the right way or not, and then judgment will really kick in. But if they weren't going astray, usually they'd be doing things the same way. So you can tell this is the same set of people, the Israelites, doing the same kind of rituals, with the same kind of Torah, and the same understanding, so that they were one. And it reminds me of the scripture, I think it's Zephaniah 3:9, is it? Let me look it up, where he says he's going to restore a language and will call back with one consent. I'm not sure. Let me see if that's it here. All right, yeah, so for Zephaniah 3:9, for then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Most High to serve him with one consent. Now, some are saying this doesn't necessarily mean the actual language that you speak with your tongue. It just means a unity, right? I kind of think that it's both, because obviously they were speaking to each other, right? But then, although that could take some more discussion, because just some other stuff I've been reading in different languages and so on. But anyway, if you say it's one consent, which is very plausible, it's very good, I like that, then obviously that one consent shows, again, what I'm saying, that when they were dealing with the regular rituals and just regular way of life in ancient Israel in the Old Testament, they had one way to operate that was common and normal, right? So that's the same one consent which the Most High saying is going to bring back here in Zephaniah 3 verse 9. One consent. So with one consent, you can look in the early part of the Old Testament and see them living like that, according to one consent or one agreement based on one instruction from the one God they were serving, the God of Israel, that came through Moses and other prophets and so on, other teachings of, So one consent, they were doing things the same kind of way, but the New Testament drifts radically from that one consent, one agreement, one practice, one lifestyle of the Israelites to trying to introduce different things which can be traced to other nations like the Romans and the Greeks and so on, right? It diverts from it, so that you can read the New Testament, and if you're examining carefully, it looks like a different set of Israelites in the New Testament than the Israelites that were in the Old Testament. See, that's my problem. That's my problem. Right? And I'm telling you, people are having a tough time. Maybe I'm not right on with some of these, like every single point that I make in all these videos in the New Testament is fake serious, right? But to give you an example, now something I'm reading up on, which I'm not finished yet, but I'll throw it out here because it looks correct. If it's not, then I'll have to make that correction because I'm saying it here now. But just as a way of a correction, it seems so far, as I've mentioned a time or two, that a part of the whole sacrifice is where they would tie a rope to the priest, and if he dies in the temple, then they would, Holy of Holies, then they'd be dragging him out. It seems some are saying that this practice originated later on, probably in the Middle Ages or something like that, and it was never really there in ancient Israel. So I could stand to be corrected on that, Um, when I was in Bible college in the Christian church, like in 1991, 92, 93, something like that, wherever, it was a long time ago. That's what I was taught, and looking up on it some more here, to do this New Testament is Fake series, I read up on that again, and so I threw that in there. Now that doesn't actually take from the points I'm making about the sacrifice not being the same as in the Old Testament, in terms of Jesus not being real and his sacrifice not fitting the bill and so on and so forth, right? But it still needs to be mentioned, right? Because again, as I've said before, we need to be learning, growing, changing ourselves, right? You cannot be afraid to say that you are wrong. And that's the problem with some of the teachers out there, both in the Hebrew side and in the Christian church. You cannot be afraid. If you find that you're wrong, come back, you make the corrections, move on. People respect you more because they know you are a studying person. You're not trying to deceive, you're trying to find truth. And if you later learn something that can improve the studying and the knowledge and the life of other people who are trying to serve the Most High, including yourself, they're going to more appreciate you for coming back and saying, I have more information than that now. That's what I thought. That was my understanding, but this is now what I'm finding, right? So I'm going to continue to look into that. But at least, like I'm saying, that doesn't actually take away from the sacrifice being fake, right? But because we know, like, nobody ever had, and like Moses never told them to put up no cross as an altar to do stuff with, right? Abraham didn't sacrifice on crosses, right? Like, come on, people. So I mean, something is just really odd about this Jesus being up on a cross. But I want to show you something now. From this whole sacrifice thing here. Alright, if we look here, I'm reading from gotquestion.org, and here is somebody asking a question. I'll go through this part real fast because this is not really what I really want. If Jesus is our atonement, so it's probably Christians because I think this is a Christian website. If Jesus is our atonement, why did he die at Passover instead of the Day of Atonement? And they go on trying to answer here. Every one of the Old Testament sacrifices typified Christ, which is a complete, like 100% lie. Because I'm showing through different points that different videos in this New Testament is Fake series are bringing out that that's just a complete lie. Right? The Passover sacrifice was a type of the Lord Jesus Christ as a Lamb of God. And the lamb was to be made without spot or blemish and so on, right? And an objection sometimes arises that the sacrifice was not considered an atonement. Rather, atonement was provided for the Jews via the sacrifice on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Jesus, who was killed at Passover and who is called our Passover in the New Testament, could not have been an atonement for sin. There are two ways to counter this objection. The first is simply to show that Jesus also fulfilled the symbolism of Yom Kippur. And he bore our sins in his own body, 1 Peter 2:24, tasted death for every man, Hebrews 2:9. And so he may well have done those things within the context of the Christian religion. But the Hebrews weren't Christians, never were, and still aren't. Even though Hebrews today are thinking in Christian ways, we aren't Christian, right? And so these teachings from myself and other people are helping to get us out of that kind of thinking, to drop this Christian Jesus thing, right? This Christian Messiah thing. So obviously there is a fight over, a disagreement, a fight over whether he was a Passover lamb, just a Passover sacrifice lamb, or Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement sacrifice. Now, of course, there are disagreements with different things in the scriptures, right? Even among the Hebrews. But I'm going to get off this site now because this part is kind of a waste of time to me, right? For what I want to bring out here. But let me just point out before I move on from it that I don't care what kind of disagreements we have. The sacrifice on Calvary from this Jesus Messiah and his resurrection, those two things, and some say the resurrection is more critical. I think it's just both of them linked together. But the sacrifice that Christ supposedly came to do is the most critical part of the New Testament story. And so to have such a big discrepancy between him being only a Passover lamb because of the things that are displayed in the New Testament and not actually the Day of Atonement sacrifice which would be needed for the Israelites, when the Bible is saying that he actually came only, the New Testament is saying he actually came only for the Israelites, which, God so loved the world, that world there would be the Israelites, right? And even though I don't believe in the New Testament, the Israelites that are saying that that world there would be just for the Israelites, I agree completely with them. In the writing of the New Testament, that world would be the Israelites. They're the ones who had the problem that needed transgressions to be removed from the Old Testament transgressions that they did. So I would think if the Messiah is coming, being sent from the Father to die for the world, for the transgressions that they made for breaking his laws, that would have to be the Israelites, because they're the ones who broke the laws based on commandments, right? I don't find anywhere, people might say, yeah, but the Gentiles need some forgiveness for sins too because they've sinned. Well, I don't see that they had that they cut a covenant with the Most High, right? So that there's something that the Most High, their time's going to come later to learn of the laws and so on, like Micah 4 verse 2, Isaiah 2, 3, the law will go forth from Jerusalem, so that now other nations can put away their bad living, anti-creator living, and come and learn the Most High's ways, right? So, yeah, it's appalling to me that the main sacrifice of the Messiah on Calvary doesn't seem, without great fighting, to fit the Day of Atonement, but it more fits the Passover sacrifice. What about the Day of Atonement? Isn't that critical? Anyway, I'm here now. This is from Wikipedia. And through my searching, because I'm constantly, like everyone else, I guess, reading and looking into these things, the Shechita, the Hebrew term Shechita, means the slaughtering of certain mammals and birds for food according to Jewish dietary laws written in scriptures such as Deuteronomy 12 verse 21, Deuteronomy 14:21, Numbers 11:22. Alright, so Shechita is dealing with the slaughtering of animals and so on, right? Such as when they're doing their Shechita rituals or the animal sacrifices, right? So that's what Shechita is dealing with. Now, when you deal with Shechita, a Shochet is usually the one who would actually perform the Shechita ritual, or the actual sacrifice of like cutting the animal, right? The sacrifice of the animal. That Shochet is usually a high priest. Now, I touched on this in that recent video with the Calvary was not kosher. Probably lesson 20 of the New Testament is fake series, which is what I'm doing this for as well. And I mentioned that the high priest is the one who would be the priest. He would be the Shochet, right? And he would actually cause the blood flow from the animal by slicing the animal with a very sharp, specially made knife, as like a ritual knife, right? To cut the animal so that the animal would experience quick death, minimal suffering, and so on, right? Usually, like you get a lamb or so, and they'd cut across the throat. I mean, sometimes they'd cut down like that, but usually they'd cut across the throat. You couldn't, the Shochet, the sacrifice and the animal being slaughtered would not be kosher anymore if the high priest did something, let me just say, wrong, right? Wrong here meaning like if he would be too jerky with the knife, or if he would press on the knife, that would be wrong, and so that would just count out the animal, right? The Shochet, or the priest doing the which is the one trained and qualified to slice up the animal or to cause the flow of blood from the animal. And I got a lesson to do in New Testament fake series entitled The Flow of Blood, which is going to show again in another way, nothing to do with this Shochet and Shechita, but it's going to show in another way how the sacrifice of Jesus was fake for both Hebrews and Gentiles who want to be Christians, to trust in this Jesus Messiah, right? The flow of blood, look for that. is going to deal with the Kidron Valley. I'm going to come with that one day. But anyway, so the animal had to be carefully cut, like a cross, like that, right across the neck, in a nice, sharp kind of movement. If he was jerking too much or pressing on the knife instead of slicing with the knife, it would just be like, no, no, right? So the animal would be unkosher. If he did whatever else or if he tried to stab the animal instead, something like that, right? No, it had to be a nice, careful cut across, right? So the Shochet was a well-trained priest just for that job. Now, when you look at that, you certainly know that then the Shochet or the priest doing that ritual was specially trained and so on, was a priest, right? Priest. And I already told you that him causing the flow of blood, which doesn't have anything to do with that lesson, flow of blood, that I said I'm going to mention, because that's not what it's going to talk about, really. That's not the point of that. But when he causes a flow of blood, that's the priest that's specially trained and had to perform ritual sacrifice for himself and washing and cleansing and so on, right? For his own cleansing before he did the sacrifice on the Day of Atonement and so on. But the Roman soldier was causing the flow of blood. First they whipped him, crown of thorns and so on. So that Roman soldier, right, would be taking the place of the Shochet, that priest that's going to do the cutting. So because he is the only person in that Roman soldier that's causing the flow of blood by the crown of thorns or by the spear, jabbing him in his side to come up with blood and water, is the only person in the crucifixion story that actually brings the blood, and the soldier as well too that whipped him and flogged him to let him bleed, right? These soldiers, or this soldier, if it's one person, I don't know, most likely different soldiers, but these soldiers are the only ones to be causing the blood to come from the Messiah, the Hebrew Messiah, as far as I'm aware of, right? And as far as it shows in the story. So he would then take the place of the Shochet. And as we learn, the Shochet cannot just jab or stab the sacrifice. It make it unkosher. So then Jesus' sacrifice would be not kosher, because him himself as the Lamb of Calvary, the Son of God, would be unkosher even when he is pierced and caused to bleed with the thorns instead of being sliced in his neck. And when he's when he's whipped as well, and when he's stabbed with a spear in his side, right? The way that they're treating this Lamb of Calvary, Jesus, the Son of God, so-called, is not according to the training and special preparation of the Shochet or the priest that's supposed to handle the sacrifice in a careful manner. Again, I'm showing you by more research things I never knew. I never knew the word Shekita or Shochet in my life until today, just doing more reading and studying, right? So I'm showing you that as you continue to read, you see that this Jesus stuff is fake. It's fake for the Christians. The pastors aren't going to give it up, but it is also a problem that the Hebrew teachers are still teaching this Jesus stuff, and they know very well, because they know this stuff a lot better than I. Having had years in this stuff, like I said, I'm only coming on to 3 years in this thing, and I can find these things. They know these things, but they do not want to talk about them because they cannot afford to drop their Jesus teachings. That is the problem you're facing right here. Yet the Bible says, I desire truth. The Most High says, I desire truth in the inward parts. But they know these things and they continue, right? Now, for some of them, they might not know it in terms of, they might have read these things, but they don't apply, because it's not every time you learn something, you apply it to everything else that you know and that you teach. So I don't want to jump on everyone, right? You know, but I'm saying for those who are aware and have made the connection already, something is wrong. Something is wrong. And if you're listening to these other teachers in the Hebrew camps and so on, you must, right? And let me just point out here, even though you hear me talk about the Hebrew camps, of course, there's none right where I'm at, so I can't, right? Let me just make it very clear. Even though I have not yet settled on a particular camp to keep in touch with online, I do follow a certain camp. I'm starting to follow them now regularly, right? I don't want to mention the name right now, but There's a camp that I've been in touch with a brother, although I haven't talked to him recently. I need to get back in touch with him. And I do follow a camp as much as I can, like on the Sabbath and regularly, right? So that's just to show you that I'm not just on my own. Well, physically I'm on my own because there's no other person running a camp around me, but I'm not just being irresponsible by sitting down learning on my own. I'm learning from this particular camp. Of course I listen to everybody, but this particular camp I've kind of chosen right now because I like the teachings, I like the way they operate, and this brother has really helped me with a few stuff. And so I've listened to his camp, and maybe shortly I'll let him know that, I've kind of chosen to learn and follow his camp more closely from, even though I can't be there physically. So that's just to let you know I'm approaching this whole thing of not being in a camp and teaching online. I'm approaching it as responsibly as I can, right? And later on I'll bring up the name once I give it a little bit more time. But anyway, yeah. So you see. And by the way, it's not that this camp in particular believes everything I believe, and I've chosen to follow them because I believe everything they believe, because there's some things I'm working through. The brothers helped me with them stuff, and I can tell that there's other stuff that I don't see eye to eye with them, but I'm going to talk with the brothers some more, learn some more. But just because I don't agree with everything, and doesn't mean that I'm still not going to fellowship with them from a distance, right? So it's not about, you can't find anybody that you agree with everything 100%, right? The Most High is going to make us one more fully later on. So it's not about agreement, full agreement, or anything like that. No, we're just one people, and I've just been talking with the brother for a while, so I settled on his camp because the brother I really appreciate his help and so on. Okay, so the Torah states in Deuteronomy 12:21 that sheep and cattle should be slaughtered as I have instructed you. Excuse me. Actually, let me read that here and see what it actually says. Alright, Deuteronomy 12:21. If the place which the Most High thy power hath chosen to put his name there be too far from thee, then thou shalt kill of thy herd and of thy flock, which the Most High hath given thee, as I have commanded thee, and that thou shalt, whatever, right? The rest of it. Yeah, so as he has commanded, right? So again, building upon what I said earlier, that the New Testament breaks from some of the stuff in the Old Testament, whereas in the Old Testament, in different places, they had the same kind of way to perform and go about their, not just their daily life, but their rituals, right? And sacrifice and so on. But the New Testament makes it different with the way that this Jesus was crucified. You see what I'm saying? As I've commanded thee. It looks different with a Roman soldier being the Shochet, the one that would actually cut with a knife, right? That he doesn't even have a knife, and two, they're using thorns and whips to let the blood come out of his body. And then Job is stabbing him up with a spear, which should not be done according to how the Shochet should handle himself. So it just really, it's strange, right? Now let me skip from that now and run over now. This is my last point to close it off here from chabad.org, chabad.org. And this question here says, can anyone perform Shechita? Remember I said Shechita, Shechita, is dealing with just the Shechita rituals, the sacrifice, of the animals, right? Birds or the animals, and how those sacrifices are actually performed, right? By the priest, right? And the one who would normally perform this Shechita ritual is the Shochet, or the priest that was specially trained, to kill the animal, right? And like I was saying, the Roman soldier certainly wasn't specially trained, so how in the world was he doing that to an Israelite sacrifice, an Israelite lamb? Well, it's kind of funny that I said Israelite lamb, because lambs are Israelite, but it's because Jesus is being called a lamb, and he is an Israelite of Judah. Then that's why it came out like that, Israelite lamb. But you get what I'm saying, that he's performing an Israelite sacrifice, and he's a Roman soldier. He's a heathen. He's a heathen. He's not a Shochet. He's not a priest. Not a high priest. He's not even an Israelite. So something's wrong with that sacrifice on Calvary. Please think of this, right? So the question here comes now to close off: can anyone perform Shechita? Here's the answer, just in one paragraph that they're giving. Only a Jew, specially trained for Shechita, called a Shochet, Shochet, can perform Shechita. So they're saying only a Shochet can perform a Shechita. He is required to study for a number of years and is examined, right? So this is like a priest, right? Is examined in theory and practice to make sure he gets it right in the laws of Shechita, animal anatomy, and pathology. He serves an apprenticeship with an experienced Shochet before becoming fully qualified. The position of a Shochet, or Shochet, actually I don't even know how that should be pronounced, as a God-fearing person of integrity is a respected one in the Jewish community. Now when you do other readings, it will let you know it's usually a high priest. He's usually the only one. Some information is saying most of the times it would be the high priest, but it could be someone else. But in any case, it would be an Israelite, right? And others are saying it's always or usually the high priest himself. But in any case, it's not a Gentile and it's not a Roman soldier with some spear and a crown of thorns to put in the sacrifice's head, like Jesus' head, and with a whip and all that. No, it's not no Roman soldier. So the sacrifice in Calvary was not done properly. You know, I don't know, I mean, for this lesson, I don't know how else to put it across to you. As something was just seriously wrong with the sacrifice. You see what I'm saying? I mean, you gotta think these things through, right? You gotta really think these things through and think for yourself. Don't just think about what your teachers are telling you. Think about the information that's coming into your mind, right? Even when I'm telling you, think about what's coming into your mind from what I'm saying in this video. Go look it up, and before you even start to look it up, the thoughts that are coming to your mind. You know how one of the ways that you arrive at truth, one of, because there's different things involved, right? It's just using plain common sense. Plain and simple like that. Plain common sense. Plain common sense. It's like if the Most High says a certain thing is wrong, or okay, let's use this one in Deuteronomy 12:21, where he says, carry this sacrifice out, you know, as I've commanded you. And somebody does it a different way. It's not as he has commanded, and it's not as the Israelites were doing. Again, as I've commanded, an example of breaking from that, which the New Testament does, is like when the Israelites start offering sacrifices in different places or to another god. That's not as the Most High commanded, because he never said to offer, for example, sacrifices to Moloch, children to Moloch, or something like that, right? So that's not as he has commanded. So they're clearly transgressing. So things that are breaking, common sense is going to tell you that the truth is that those people are wrong, even if the Israelites are wrong. And so common sense tells you, if something that people are teaching you, whether they are a camp teacher or a Christian pastor, if it does not agree with what you are seeing, the trend through the scriptures that are based on truth, then it just doesn't line up. You're going to say, no, that's not correct. So your mind's going to tell you, red flag, something's going on here. That's not right. Let me look into that some more. Because if you've got the Most High's word in you and you're carefully studying and so on, when something wrong comes, it's going to start to feel kind of funny to you, right? The Hebrew word for heart is leb, right? L-E-B, right? And it's dealing with your mind, your emotions, your feelings, right? Your inner thoughts, your inner functions, your inner actions, and so on, right? And so that word leb is used to deal with all the inner capacity that you have, right? Of things that you usually don't see, all right? Things that you usually don't see, like I said, your feelings, your thoughts. So when it says stuff like, in their heart, they turn in their heart toward the Lord, or they decide in their heart, you know, or in their mind to return to the Lord, you know, return to the Most High. That in their mind or in their heart is dealing with the inner parts of them that you don't see, where decisions are made, where thoughts happen, right? and where the mind is at work to say, we're going to return to the Most High, return to His instructions, His commandments, His Torah, right? Those are things you don't see. And it has feelings in it. It's like the first time the Israelites would be like, okay, we're going to offer up our children now. We're going to take one child from each family and so on, and we're going to offer up to Moloch. Something in their heart right away is, and they start feeling bad, and my child has to die and all that. That feeling that just like tears up their world, right? But they go ahead with it still because they are pressured by the priests to do that. But they know something is wrong. And so they follow priests, follow teachers. So damn that hell. Don't follow your teacher because your teacher says something. Follow what the Most High says. And your teachers, being truthful, should reinforce that by being good, sharp teachers who are constantly studying to learn more and understand more of what the Most High is saying. But now, so you see, the heart, the inner functions of the heart says, that don't feel right to me. I'm going to lose my little baby now, right? But now, if you get a good king that comes down, there's lots of good priests and things are going well, they're keeping the Torah properly and so on, right? And they're going to offer up some sacrifice to the Most High, and they're rejoicing and things are going well, they're being blessed and crop is growing nice amount of rain, all kinds of stuff. And they're coming before the Most High now for some celebration or feast or whatever. The inner function of leb, of the heart, feels good. Everybody's joyful, right? Because there's truth there. They know they're supposed to go and meet on the Sabbath. They know they're supposed to go and do this feast. They know they're supposed to go and do that ritual. So leb has feelings to it that makes them feel good, like they're coming towards the Most High for something good, and it's just blessings. It feels refreshing and good. We're in tune with the Most High. There's, it's good, and the Most High is pleased with us. See that? It feels good. So leb tells you internally that this is right. And of course, that's if you are following Torah correctly or studying and learning properly, right? It reveals to you, right, through your actual feelings. So when you're hearing people teaching about Jesus, in light of these teachings that I'm doing with New Testament is fake, and other people are doing with the same New Testament is fake stuff, about this Calvary sacrifice and Jesus and whatever, when you hear people saying that, if the feelings coming to you, something is wrong with what I've been taught all along in the Christian church or something like that, you have to know that that is happening inside of you because leb, the inner function of leb, the inner function of the heart is rising up to saying, check that out. That don't sound proper. I'm agitated inside my mind, inside my leb, inside my heart. That don't sound right. And you approach it like that, you begin to study and search it out, right? That's how you deal with this stuff, right? Anyway, I've talked enough. Thank you for listening. I'll probably entitle this Shochet. See you next time.